Welcome to the Buff Show. Today we have Ann Atkins with Meth Mob here. And you guys are probably like, Meth Mob? What the heck? What the heck are you doing? Why meth? It's funny because like when I am working with buyers, or like we get a house under contract and then they're like, well, what do we do next? I'm like, well, you want to do a home inspection.
Yep.
And here's a list of other things you can do. Sewer scope, radon test. And then they'll say meth test. And they're like meth test? Like methamphetamine?
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, methamphetamine. And people don't realize it, but a stat I heard, and I don't know if it was you from one of your classes, but is it 1 in every 10 homes?
That's a national stat.
National.
And in Utah, I think our stat is higher just because we're in the top 5 for meth use per capita. We do a ton of meth. And so depending upon the home inspector that I'm talking to, they'll tell me between 1 in 3 to 1 in 10. And a lot more are in that probably 1 in 5 area.
Yeah.
That's a pretty common number that I hear. It's crazy.
That is
the amount
wild.
of houses. Yeah.
I've heard that same, like home inspectors, they always seem like it's a lot higher. And I think that's because a lot of buyers will be like, yeah, this house we should probably test
Right,
for
they'll
meth.
judge it by the appearance of it, yeah.
And you can kind of tell, but like explain meth a little bit, because when I got started, I was like, I had no idea like what it was, how it was used, is it smoke, like how do you do it? But
so it's kind of a crazy drug because it's not that we don't care about drugs in houses, but this isn't a drug in houses, it's a contamination that's left behind because meth is one of those drugs that's manufactured. And the things that they put in cooking it, there's one molecule difference between Sudafed and meth. So they use that cooking process to change Sudafed into meth, and they use crazy things like Drano and heat and starter fluid. And all those products are left behind in the teeny tiny crystals that are left behind in the vapor. So you have all this crazy carcinogenic stuff left behind that doesn't off-gas and it doesn't go away. So not that I'm an advocate for heroin and marijuana and cocaine, but at least they're natural.
Right.
This stuff is just, people would never use meth if they knew what was in it. It's just crazy.
that is bizarre. And I think one thing that people don't realize is it's not like smoking where you walk into a house and you smell the cigarette smoke.
Right.
Meth is, you cannot detect it. It's odorless,
Yeah.
it's sightless.
Yep.
Like there's perfectly normal houses that I'm like, oh, this house would never have meth. And then
Sure enough.
sure enough.
Yeah.
And it's funny, even like I've sold homes where, you know, they built it and they've been there for, 50 years and raised their kids there and just like salt of the earth people.
Yep.
And then we did a meth test, came back just, not super high, but it had meth in it. And they're like, oh, it wasn't us. But what people don't realize is they could have had a grandson come stay there or just anybody,
Yeah, that is the house in the real estate market. I tell people test every house every time. I'm an advocate of test every house every time because I think it's easy for all of us. We're all judgers, right? We're raised right here in Utah. We know how to judge and sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong and it keeps us safe and so judgment isn't a bad thing.
Right.
But I think it's easy to look at a house and go, oh, this nasty thing, we better do a meth test versus oh, this lovely thing, there's no way.
Right.
And what I find is the majority of the houses we do are ones that surprise me. They're the nice houses. Because what I find in the real estate world, the houses that have meth in are the houses that have helped somebody. And like you said with grandma, grandpa houses, they have opportunity to help people. And in Utah, we are great at helping each other.
Right.
We really are a giving, loving state, and we help each other get on their feet. And there's so many houses that have helped somebody that it doesn't do any good to judge the house by, oh, the current occupants look great, the house is beautiful. Probably not here because we don't know what went on in that house 5 months ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and it doesn't off-gas and go away, so it'll still be there.
Yeah. And what are the side effects?
The Utah Department of Health has a list of things that they believe third-hand meth can contribute to. And so really, I'm just going to go look on the Utah Department of Health and Google the meth portion. I don't think it's going to affect everybody the same, so I'm not afraid of meth. I do believe they should be taken care of. If there's meth in houses, take care of it. It's kind of almost like the COVID. Well, who's it going to affect? How's it? It depends. It depends on your genetic makeup. And I know the majority of it's down there on the floors where the littles are crawling. I mean, our standard was written on what's safe for an infant on a daily basis. And that's why I decontaminate houses is for the littles. We're probably put worse stuff in our bodies than third-hand meth if you're a Red Bull drinker like I am, Who knows?
Right. No, that makes sense. The clientele I've been working with, people with kids and stuff, like running around on the carpet, but I've tried to research it, and there's not like, we know it's harmful, but there's not like this will happen to you. So it kind of is like,
Here's
depends.
kind of the perspective that I put it in, and this is probably way too long for your podcast, but
Oh no, it's great.
But you would never take a bath in a 55-gallon drum of gasoline.
No.
Ever. None of
No.
us ever would. But who hasn't sniffed gas at the gas pump?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're the exact same product, but one is a lot more acute than the other.
Right.
And so smoking meth, that first-hand meth, we all know the effects of that. Your teeth fall out and the scabs, and it changes your brain completely. I mean, it's just nobody would dispute the first-hand effects of meth. And when somebody's smoking meth, in that vapor, there's teeny tiny baby crystal meth left in the vapor. Wherever it lands, it just lands, and then it can absorb through our skin, so it's just a lesser amount. So I don't worry if I sniff a little gas while I'm loading up my lawnmower or filling up my car, but I'd never let a 2-year-old sniff it.
Yeah.
I'd never put Red Bull in a baby bottle.
Right.
And so there's a lot of things that I go, I know the first-hand effect is horrible. It's hard to go, well, are those issues with that child because their parents were meth users, or is it because of our air on some days in Utah? There's so many variables in life. I trust it, and I don't think it's the big bad boogeyman that sometimes people think it is. First-hand meth, no doubt, it's crazy, but we're just talking generally in houses, less acute levels. And if I've got to get it down under 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters for a meth lab, why wouldn't I do that for a meth use house?
Right. Yeah.
So
for sure. So what does the process look like? We get a house under contract. Buyer's like, what should I do? I always recommend meth testing on every house, but I would say maybe 50% of people actually do it. And every year, like, we run into it. Some cases more extreme than others. I've seen it from, like, sometimes you'll be just under that limit, the one limit. We actually did a flip on a house in Bountiful, and it was a level 300. I'm like, are we going to have to rip the sheetrock out?
And you didn't have
No,
to?
we didn't have to. It ended up being okay. I think I'll let you describe the process. So kind of what does it look like? What does that inspection process look like for you? Because you can have a home inspector do it, or you offer the testing service yourself as well.
And I prefer the home inspectors do it, and I'm happy to train home inspectors because I want them to do a good job, but it's way cleaner when they find it than when we find it.
Yeah.
So I'm, again, a fan of test every house every time, have your home inspector do it. They're generally less expensive than we are. They're only inconveniencing the seller one time, and they can give us generally enough information. So when they're lower, you know, it requires a little more conversation because, you know, the seller's going, oh my gosh, I'm just under, I'm good, and the buyer's going, oh, we're all going to die.
Right, yeah.
Versus a 300 is simple. You go, oh, we're decontaminating it. So the higher the number, the simpler it is. We just get them all under. But the process for us is our first day, we call it our dry day. And that's where we go hook up a great big HEPA vacuum to the furnace, and we suck out all the crayons, Tinker Toys, dust bunnies, all the stuff that's in the HVAC system. So it's almost like what a duct cleaner does. And then we send our decontamination solution through all those lines, the supply lines, the plenums, cold air return. We pull the squirrel cage out of the furnace. And so that's what we do on day one is our dry day. We pull the drawers out of the cupboards. We literally vacuum up the house.
Just clean it out.
Yeah, because the process is wet. So we don't want any meth mud. We want the decontamination to happen without gunk.
Right. So carpet, furniture, like...
That's all gone
They've
out.
got to go.
Yeah.
Which is okay on most transactions because somebody's moving out into another place, but hopefully the timing lines up. But most of our houses have been vacant, and so it's been okay.
Yeah.
But carpet, always basically.
Carpet and pad, go. Anything permeable.
Yeah.
So if you have cushiony
walls, this would have to go.
That'd go. If you have
Drapery.
fabric blinds, the
Yeah.
1-inch blinds, 2-inch blinds, sometimes we can get, sometimes we can't. It just kind of depends. But yeah, the permeable stuff. So like the acoustic ceiling tiles.
Oh, that'd have to
And we
go.
don't see a lot of that in houses. Sometimes in the basement, or sometimes grandma houses, you know, they've got that 12-inch glue up ceiling.
Yeah.
And a lot of times by now that's painted, so it's no longer permeable. But yeah, all that goes on day one, the dry day. And then day 2, 3, and 4, we're scrubbing every inch of ceiling, wall, floor, cupboard, drawer, duct, Harry Potter closet, the furnace, the supply lines. We're scrubbing all of that. We use the Apple environmental product. You can get it at Interlink Supply in Salt Lake. And then on the 5th business day, we rinse everything down with fresh rinse water. So it's almost like doing dirty dishes dirty dishes, rinse water.
Yeah.
So that's a week. And then the next business day, so now you're into week 2, we're going to test all the rooms with the health department.
Yeah.
Then we've got our testing time at the lab. So it's about a 2-week process by the time you do all the permitting, the work, and wait for the test results to come back.
No, that's awesome. Do you guys have a guarantee? Like, what if it doesn't pass?
We absolutely have a guarantee, and we're dang good every day, but we're not perfect. In fact, just last night, we had a house come back that we were finishing, and there were 2 rooms that we didn't get under the legal limit. I've got a team back in there today.
Right.
We go back in, we redo it, we rush the tests, and there's no additional charge. I guarantee everything I do. And so we're good. We're just not perfect. So we have to go back sometimes, and we will. That's just no additional charge. That's on us to get it right. It's a magic between trying to get it under the limit and not destroying the house.
Exactly, and that's what people don't realize. And I think that also depends, like, it's important who you hire, too, because there's some companies that go through and just soak the house, and there can be a lot of damage that comes from that as well.
It can be painful.
Yeah.
It can be painful, and like in real estate, all agents aren't the same, all decontamination specialists aren't the same. I'm grateful we have a great reputation in Utah, and we cover the whole state, and I think we've earned it, which is why we have the reputation we have. We really do want to do an awesome job and not torture a house more than necessary, and I want every house that we leave safe enough that I'd put my own grandkids in.
Yeah.
So...
And it is pretty cool. When you get it turned around, you're like, it feels clean. Like, it's like...
Oh, my gosh.
It's
everything's out of there. There's no COVID. There's no fentanyl. There's no meth. There's no anthrax. There's no... And even for allergies, you know, the dust bunnies that are in the duct, all of that's gone. It's clean.
Yeah. So there are some perks to it. I think what people don't realize, because do you have like an average cost for a house that you typically see?
Right now, our minimum is $4,800, and I can do about a 2,000 square foot and under for that. That's going to include the permit with the local health department. So, you know, Weber, Morgan, Davis, Salt Lake, Tooele, they're all the same price, Bear River Cache. But that's going to include the permit, all the testing, guaranteed pass on everything. That does not include if we have to make a run to the dump.
Gotcha.
So sometimes if that carpet and pad is out,
you're
so most of my stuff runs between about $4,500 and $6,000.
Okay.
Every now and again, you know, we'll get some bigger houses that are different. If it's HVAC system only, we end up doing some pre-testing in advance, and those, you're probably right in the $3,000 range.
Yeah.
And then we don't have to torture a house. And
Right.
And those happen too, but they're probably 20%, 80% full decon.
Yeah. Yeah, going along that, a lot of buyers are like, I think they pay more attention, like, oh, this is going to cost 10 or 20 grand, or we're going to have to rip all the sheetrock out. And like, they just don't have the understanding of what the process looks like. But there are more expenses that I want people to be aware of, like putting in new carpet. And, you know, you might have a few things here that get damaged during that cleaning process that you would have to replace.
Yeah.
But overall, the house will be left cleaner than it was, for sure. And you won't have to clean out the cupboards and drawers and stuff like that.
Right,
That'll be all clean. So there's a few perks to it.
Here's an interesting thought, too, on testing in advance. You know, when you're doing your home inspection, it's easy to go, oh, it doesn't look like this house is going to have any issues. Let's don't spend the extra money and do that. But from a seller's perspective, it isn't just $5,000 to Meth Mob. It is that carpet. There's generally some paint touch-up somewhere.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people say they don't bubble paint, and I'm
Right.
just willing to admit 80% of our houses have at least a bubble somewhere. Everybody bubbles paint. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. So you can have some paint touch-up, and
What about hardwood floors?
the more real the wood, the better they hold up.
Really?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so that, you know, the
engineered.
cheaper Pergo type flooring that has cardboard backing,
Right.
paper it absorbs.
Yeah.
So those don't hold up as well, but generally hardwood holds up really good.
Gotcha.
And it depends on the seams too.
Yeah.
But that holds up good. But by the time, you know, you got a 2-week process with us, and then you have carpet people coming back in, and they're making another house payment. From a seller perspective, they go, oh, it's 10 or 15 grand.
Right.
And if you don't do your home inspection test when you buy it, when you go to sell it in 5 years, it'll still be there, and you'll be stuck with that. And I have at least one of my clients bought their meth problem, didn't know it, didn't test, and now is stuck with it.
And they have to live with that thought of like, oh man, we've been living in this house for 3 years,
Right.
5 years, and like, who knows, you know, maybe they some health issues have arose, and like, you just don't know. So
Yep.
I think it's always better to be safe than sorry.
Yep.
Like, you can have a house tested for a couple $100. Like, it's not that much to just have that added on
Yeah,
during
it really
the home
isn't.
inspection.
I think most of the home inspectors are right in that 150 range.
Yeah, and they do. They'll test typically 3 or 4 areas,
Uh-huh.
if I'm not mistaken, and they always test the cold air return because that's where like everything gets sucked into. So when you do meth, it's like a vapor, right?
Yeah.
It gets pulled through the air
Yeah.
and gets stuck in the furnace. So
Yeah.
just by doing that, you'll know if it comes back. So let's run through a few examples because
Okay.
I've had it from like 0.8.
Yep.
If it's 0.8, my clients still freak out.
Right.
And they're like, there's meth in there, but I'm like, you need to understand what like 0.8 means. So can you like anything under 1, like what does that look like in the perspective of like how much meth is in the house?
So the state standard, 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters, what I generally do with people is I put it in a dollar format and go, when you see it on the report, it looks like 1.00,
Yeah.
like you're looking at $1. And people can wrap their brains around $1.
Yeah, that's
So you can
true.
have $1's worth of meth in
Right.
about a 4-inch by 4-inch square. So when you say 0.8, 80 cents. And I've literally had people bail out over 0.11, 11
Oh
cents.
my gosh.
Now, most anybody I can keep in the deal, and I'm
Yeah.
a fan of keep the deal together.
Right.
But anything can freak some people out.
Right.
So if you have those lower numbers where your client's like, I don't want some, I want none,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we can go in there and do a deep clean on the HVAC system and take it down to no detect. That's pretty simple.
Yeah.
But the closer it gets to 1, the more heartache they have.
Right.
And for me, I just go, I clear houses every day with the health department at 0.8, at 0.5, at 0.3. We had a house that it was just last week and the HVAC came back at 0.97. So it cleared with the health department, but I'm like, give me a day. Let me get my team back in here and get it
Yeah.
handled. I don't like them close, but it'll clear. And if it's good enough for the health department, I'm good.
Right. Yeah.
So I clear houses every day in my company with traces of meth, and I'm good with that, and I would
Right.
put my own grandkids in there.
Yeah.
You have to do a test to know what level it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you do a test and you go, I'm good with 0.8, I'm solid,
Yeah.
I'm
very
good with
Yeah.
that.
At like 0.8, definitely the ductwork being cleaned. And
Mm-hmm.
and that like that's nice to do just when you buy a new house anyways. You don't
Right.
want the previous owner's dog hair and cat hair and just everything like getting
Right.
pushed through
Right.
the air. So that's nice to have cleaned anyways.
Yeah.
What about like carpet? If it's that low, do you typically say, hey, let's do
Um,
new carpet, or is it?
I guess this is the tricky part. If I saw that it was a 0.8 and the carpet was 5 years old,
Yeah,
I might want to try and negotiate some new
that's
carpet.
true. Yeah,
You know, if it was just late, I wouldn't sweat it one bit.
right.
I
Yeah.
really wouldn't. Sometimes it's nice to have a little history on the house because
Mhm.
when you go to the seller and go, you got a 0.8, they could easily go, yeah, Meth Mob just decontaminated it last week. Here's the report.
Right.
Or they could go, yeah, we had it decontaminated when we bought 5 years ago. Or they're shocked by it,
Mm-hmm.
or they know right where it came from.
Right.
And sometimes when you have a little bit of information that it's like, oh, my crappy spouse, the gift that keeps on giving him, I divorced him 10 years ago over drugs.
Yeah.
What are the odds that that is still in that carpet if it's brand new?
Yeah.
Slim to none.
Yeah.
And I know you don't always have the luxury of information in a transaction, but the newer the carpet and the lower the numbers, I have less heartburn.
Right. Is there like, can you paint a picture of like 1, like the level 1? Somebody told me like there was a football field. Level 1 is like, I can't remember how they put it.
It's like a popcorn kernel crunched up and spread over a football field.
Really?
It is teeny tiny.
So it's like
It's teeny
you'd
tiny.
be lucky to run into it, basically. And so
Yeah.
that's why the health department has set that standard. They have
Yeah.
that level 1, and we've seen it. I run into it pretty frequently where it is under, but my clients are still like, "Hey, let's have you clean the ductwork. Nice to have, and then if the carpet's older, replace that, and then like
and they're
we're good to
good.
go."
Yep.
I think where people get heartburn is they'll tell their mom or a family member.
Right.
And then it's just like, you're buying a meth house, you know?
Yep.
And
The stigma of it is worse than the actuality of it.
right. Yeah.
I go, like you said, the silver lining of after decontamination is you pick the carpet color, you pick the paint, you're walking into a solid house.
Yeah.
The downside is you have to educate people that we have a lot of meth use in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing with meth is we do stigmatize it and go, oh my gosh, they're down, the homeless, all the trauma that comes with it. And most of the houses that I see in the real estate transaction, they've been a house that has helped somebody try to be on the wagon. And 85% of the users of meth go back to meth within the first 2 years. It is so crazy,
crazy.
the recidivism rate. So this household helps out somebody, and then they fall off the wagon and they move on. And 5 years later, that homeowner has no clue it's even in their
Right.
house.
Yeah.
And so if we look at meth use in houses as a house that somebody's helped somebody out
Right.
versus, oh, they've had Breaking Bad in the basement,
Right.
I think we
Yeah.
tend to go, oh, you just bought the meth lab, the drug house in the neighborhood,
Right.
instead of going, oh, you bought a house that probably helped somebody out at some point while they were trying to get on the wagon, fell off the wagon. And at least based upon my experience, that's the majority of my work. It's not the homeowners that have done it.
Right.
They've helped somebody out.
Yeah.
And I think that comes with education, with you doing things like this, where we change the stigma of meth into, all right, it's like finding out there's,
Leaky roof.
bad
Yeah.
water heater.
Yeah.
You fight over who's going to pay for it, but nobody freaks out over it.
Right. It definitely doesn't condemn a house, and that's what people think.
Yeah.
So let's go over that process.
'Kay.
Let's say the home inspector does a meth test. It comes back at a 3 or a 4. So
Yeah.
like above the state, but not crazy high. Does that have to be reported to the health department?
Everything over 1 microgram has to be reported to the health department. So here's the people that are legally required to report to the health department. Certified decontamination specialists, and there aren't many. There's only 28 in the whole state. I employ 5. I mean, it's a teeny tiny number. But then homeowners of record are required to self-report. Now, they typically don't.
Right.
So we're in a buyer beware state. It's like meth test every
Still
house,
check,
every
yeah.
time.
Right.
Still do it. But when you get one of those as an agent and you get a 3 or a 4, I think that you have timing on your side. I'm a fan of timing. The health
Right.
department is not a fan of timing. If they get a report that is over, and we'll just talk Weber Morgan Health Department because that's where we're at. But if they got a home inspector test today that was a 3 or 4, they'd go put a tag on the door that says you have 10 days or we're going to shut this house down. And if one of my tests goes in, a certified decontamination specialist test, then they'll shut it down that day.
Really?
So it's painful. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another reason why I like home inspector tests. They know what they're doing. They take it to the same lab I do.
Yeah.
If you got a 3 or 4 and the people, the transaction is already on the track. Maybe the appraiser's going to be out there next week and they're going to move out after, maybe they're going to have Christmas in the house and move out January 1st. Can it wait till January 3rd?
Right.
Ann
Yeah.
Atkin says yes. The health department,
Says no.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think those test results can be used with your own judgment.
Yeah.
It's not really the letter of the law. I have a letter of the law. I do turn in within 5 business
Yeah,
days.
you
I
have
don't
to.
want to lose my license.
Right.
On home inspector tests, I go, if the house is vacant, we'll get on it right away. If they're
Right.
moving out
Give 'em a few
January
days.
30th and they've been there for 10 years,
Yeah.
the horse is out of the barn.
It has been a pro in like a few of my transactions where it was tenants in the house. We found meth,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Great, we wanted these tenants out." So it's
Yep.
like we turned
They're-
it in, and they're
Yeah.
like, "You have 10 days to get out of here. Sorry,
Yeah.
like, this isn't our problem.
That's
it's
the
yours."
silver lining on those two is, yes, you can turn them in, and the eviction,
Easy.
it's fast. Yeah, yeah.
So I guess if you have any tenants that are not getting out of your house, just maybe do a Hail Mary and do a meth test, see if it comes back.
Yeah,
positive.
you can. And then if it does, you have to be prepared to do the decontamination
That's true.
too.
That's true.
You know,
it's kind
so
of a double-edged sword.
yeah. But I go, if you're doing a decontamination, that's a perfect time to put new paint, new flooring down,
Get more rent.
get more rent.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that is so true.
Yeah.
So a buyer has the meth test done, comes back positive. The buyer gets that report from the home inspector. I've never had a home inspector turn it into the meth
And
to
they
the health
won't.
department.
Home
And-
inspectors are not going to turn it in. The lab's not going to turn it in. Real estate agents don't turn it in. Now, you
Yeah.
have to report on MLS, you know,
Yeah.
if you're the listing agent and the buyer bells. But generally, everybody stays in the deal.
yeah.
And that's what I want. It's like you brought up a bad roof.
right.
So fix the roof. Let's
figure
fix
out.
it and keep. You
Yeah.
got a happy seller. You got a happy buyer. Let's fix
Yeah,
it.
you love the house. Yeah, you can get rid of the meth part.
Yeah, for sure.
So who do you typically see pay for it?
Well, it depends on the market, right?
Yeah.
Last year was kind of an anomaly.
Yeah.
As you know, the market. Generally, it's the seller.
Yeah.
Generally, it's kind of whoever gets caught with it loses. There's
Right.
no law that says anybody has to. So last year, I had a lot more buyers paying for it because it was less expensive to decontaminate than lose their non-refundable earnest money.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's an anomaly. That was kind of a one-year deal. Generally, it's the sellers, but not always.
Yeah.
It kind of just depends on the transaction.
It really does, yeah. And I've seen it go both ways, but I would say
Yeah.
80% of the time it's the seller.
Sellers. The buyers generally have the leverage
Right.
to
yeah.
go, I want this house. Everything's negotiable, but that's a non-negotiable because, again, there's so much stigma with it. Do you want to sell a meth house or keep me in the deal?
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah. And the seller, they're married to the problem at that point. It's not like they're like, well, you walk and I'll find somebody else that wants the meth house, you know?
Well, and they can, but at that point, then they have to disclose. Got to go on MLS. They've got to disclose.
Yeah.
And so then they're not going to get the offer that they probably currently have.
No.
So it behooves everybody to stay in the deal, I think.
Yeah, and just get it taken care of. Because the house that we bought, we ended up taking care of it, but we got such a good deal on the house that it was like, it was okay.
Not a big deal.
And I know a lot of flippers will do that. Like if you find meth, it's great because like you're going to clean and repaint and do everything anyways. So
you get 10 or 15 grand off, you pay us 5, you're still ahead because you were going to do the work anyway.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure on the disclosure process, if the buyer buys a house, it was tested positive for meth, it's decontaminated. They don't have to like continue disclosing down the road that it was
So meth falls under the stigmatized property law,
right?
Where you don't have to disclose that it was ever anything. Now, you can't lie about it with stigmatized property. If somebody's like, oh, did Meth Mob decontaminate this? Yeah, here's the report. Here's Ann's cell number. Call her.
Yeah.
But you don't have to disclose it. And then after you run it through the health department, do all certified testing, your seller disclosures also go back to no.
Yeah.
Because seller disclosures always start at no because that's everybody's truth.
Right. Because they don't know.
They don't know.
Yeah.
And then if the buyer walks, they go to yes. But once it's decontaminated, seller disclosures go to no legally. You don't have to disclose anything.
Yeah. No, and that's awesome. And I guess one other thing to point out, keep in mind, typically you go under contract on a house, you have your due diligence period. Doing a test for meth typically takes a few days. You can expedite it.
Yeah.
But what's the typical turnaround? Isn't it 3 to 4
3 to 4 business days, and then you can pay the lab extra and they'll do it next business day. So if I turned in a test to the lab today and wanted next business day, I'd get it Friday afternoon. But if I turn it in Friday, I don't get it till Monday afternoon. So they're always business days. And so depending upon your due diligence, last year, everybody was overnighting it and they were still out of due diligence, right? Because nobody got any. If it was 5 minutes, if you got a due diligence.
Right.
But generally now there's time to do it. And so you don't necessarily have to pay rush fees unless you've got one of those tight timelines.
Right. Yeah.
And even then I would still do it because you're, at least you know.
Yeah. And there's the testing lab is in Utah, actually. It's ALS. Is that who you use? And I've been down there. They actually give out samples that you can do.
Yeah.
I don't recommend you doing that because I've tried to do that on like some rentals and stuff, and I always have to call my home inspector buddies. I'm like, how do I do it? How do I swab this? Like, and then filling it in, it's confusing, the report to fill in, but you can actually go get the report or the sample kits.
Yeah, they'll give them, I think they're charging $2 now for the kit.
Are they?
And then they charge you to read it when you bring it back in. But I'm with you, I see more operator error in that, because if you don't test good areas, it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. And if it comes back positive, they'll be like, who did it? And you'll be like, I did it. And they'll be like, oh, like that's not your profession. Right.
Yeah. So, it's like get a home inspector, get somebody legit to do the test.
It's not that much.
No.
But by the time you pick up the test and then pay for it to be dropped off, like you're about that anyways. Is there anything else that you feel like buyers or sellers need to know that we haven't covered so far?
No, we've kind of talked about it. It's really only reinforcing, don't judge a book by its cover. Just test every house every time, because any house could have helped somebody and we just don't know the history of the people that have been in that house.
Right.
It's so easy to judge a nasty house and go, oh, yeah, for sure, let's do this one.
Right.
Or it's like you said, when you're going to fix something up and flip it and wholesale it, you want those distressed ones.
Right.
So it's easy, but boy, when you get on the nice side of town and the beautiful houses and everything's perfect, it's hard to imagine it's there, and it is.
Right. Yeah, and it's like if I'm flipping a house or even on one of my properties, sometimes I'll have it tested if I'm going to sell it, because I know the history and I know it's not going to be positive, just to have that report to give with the buyers. That can be scary if you don't know. So like proceed with caution, because there are a lot of buyers that you don't want to open a can of worms that you didn't have to open if you're not sure the history of your properties. But that can be a
And here's another thing that from a listing side, because I think this is more buyer agent side, right?
Yeah.
But from a listing side, if you know your client's going to remodel, and last year nobody had to remodel, right?
Right.
It's like everything was worth $5,000 more tomorrow than it was today, no matter what. But if they're going to do all of that work anyway before they put it on the market, that's a good time to recommend a meth test.
That is very true.
Because if they remodel, and Weber Morgan's pretty strict.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a receipt for the carpet, I finally got them talked into this. A year ago, if you had brand new carpet that was laid a week ago, they'd make you throw it away.
Yeah.
Today, I can at least go, look, the receipt is from 30 days ago. Nobody's lived in here. We have to pre-test all the rooms.
Right.
But if the HVAC is 1.01,
Yeah.
$1.01,
Yeah.
it can go.
my
So
God.
it's like, if you're going to remodel property, that's not a bad idea to
That is-
pre-test.
That is so good, because that's the last thing you want to do is put all this beautiful paint and carpet and flooring and then have a buyer test and have
Yeah.
it be
And a
positive.
lot of times a home inspector does those pre-inspections, so you know what you're up against. And I
Right.
know that it's hard to get people to spend extra money, but they could do it at that point. Then you still have timing on your side. You know what
Yeah.
you need to do.
Yeah.
And you be a little bit in preparation before a
Right.
home inspector says, oh, your roof is missing half the shingles because we
Yeah.
never crawl up there.
Yeah, it is so worth the extra $150
Yeah.
to have it tested and not have the fear and worry of, am I going to have to fork out 5-10 grand down the road
Right.
to have it fixed up? And,
Right.
and like, if you have kids or family members living there, like, just do it. It's so much easier.
Yeah, it
So-
is. It is.
Well, Ann, thank you for coming on. This has been very insightful and exactly what I was
Thank you for
hoping
having
for.
me. I appreciate that. And
So where can people find out more about you if they need to get in contact?
So our website is just methmob.com, not mom, Meth Mob. And our office is 801-318-1583.
Awesome.
And yeah, if you have any questions, we're happy to help. You know that.
Yeah, no, they've
So-
been super helpful. All the real estate events they're hosting or, bringing treats and just educating people on the process. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.